Be advised, it is automatic fire, fully automatic fire from an elevated position. Take cover.
Everyone said drop, and everyone dropped, and then everyone just got up and they said run, and everyone started stampeding.
We were laying down on the floor. I didn't know to get up, to run, to stay, to duck. Didn't know if it was safe to move.
Whoever the shooter was just spraying the crowd. I mean, you just saw people dropping left and right.
The death toll now stands at 59 dead, 527 injured after what took place in Las Vegas on Sunday night. Stephen Paddock is the lone gunman. He's a domestic terrorist. As he was on the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel and Casino, he unleashed a barrage of bullets targeting a crowd of 22,000 people attending an outdoor country music festival.
It is set on the suspect's door. I need everybody in that hallway to be aware of it and get back.
That, of course, was when a SWAT team was recorded as they swarmed the upper floor of the hotel, closing in on Paddock. He took his own life once police entered his hotel room.
Our officers responded immediately in conjunction with the fire department as soon as the fire department arrived, but they were able to identify where the weapon was being discharged from. In a proximity, it's hard to tell what floor it is from the outside, but once they gained entry into the hotel in conjunction with security and through phone calls from patrons, they were able to cull it down to a possible floor. Once they made entry onto the hallway, they immediately knew what room was in question.
According to police, again, the shooter is Stephen Paddock from Mesquite, Nevada. He had checked into the hotel on Thursday. Inside his suite, they recovered 23 weapons. When they searched his home, another 18 weapons were discovered. Authorities still trying to figure out exactly what was his motive behind this. His family expressed shock and disbelief when they learned he was the shooter.
He has no criminal record. He has nothing, no affiliations with anything. There's nothing. My brother just killed 50+ people. How does that affect me? I'm a little, I got this headache right now, strangely enough. I mean, our family's huddling together and trying to hope, we're trying to make sense of this.
Now, of course, yesterday, Donald Trump led a moment of silence at the White House to honor the victims of the tragedy and ordered flags across the country lowered to half-staff, calling the shooting an act of evil. He praised Americans for their strength and solidarity.
Our unity cannot be shattered by evil. Our bonds cannot be broken by violence. And though we feel such great anger at the senseless murder of our fellow citizens, it is our love that defines us today. And always will, forever.
Yet in that statement, Trump never even mentioned guns when he gave that at the White House. Meanwhile, former presidential candidate Secretary Hillary Clinton says the way to put an end to mass killings is gun control. She tweeted, "The crowd fled at the sound of gunshots. Imagine the deaths if the shooter had a silencer," which the NRA wants to make it easier to get. Our grief isn't enough. We can and must put politics aside, stand up to the NRA, and work together to try to stop this from happening again. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders was peppered with questions about whether Trump would now tighten gun laws after the Vegas tragedy.
We haven't had the moment to have a deep dive on the policy part. This isn't a time for us to go after individuals or organizations. I think that we can have those policy conversations, but today is not that day.
Now, we also, of course, heard yesterday from someone who was personally impacted by gunfire, and that is former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords and her husband, Mark Kelly, a space shuttle commander. They held a news conference outside of the U.S. Capitol. This is what they had to say.
How many times can we say that over and over again? Now's not the time? Well, today is the time.
Also, folks, again, as I said, Donald Trump ordered flags flown at half-staff. Now the question is, will Congress do anything? Joining us right now is Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, a member of the Committee on Homeland Security. Congresswoman, first and foremost, when you look at this tragedy, folks will say, look, you could pass any new law. It could not have prevented this shooting from taking place. What is your response?
My response is that we cannot do nothing. Enough is enough. And good morning to you and good morning to your viewers. I'm sickened by this. I'd like to say I'm disgusted. This is more than just the idea of a crazed or a inexplicable act by an individual. This is a loss of life of 58 Americans, innocent Americans, again, as it was with 26 innocent children, or 9 worshipers, or those going to a movie theater. And so it is a question of whether or not we wring our hands and heap praise on those wonderful rescuers and the first responders, or whether or not we make an effort to do something. And that is the point. My statement yesterday that this was an act of domestic terrorism, plain and simple. And the fact that ISIS has now tried to claim credit for this shows that they view it as a terroristic act. And does that mean that because actions in Congress may not be perfect, the banning of military-style weapons that this individual used, 23 of them in his hotel room with rounds and rounds of ammunition, and as well ammonia nitrate, which was used in the Oklahoma bombing, that we should not do something. So I believe that, though I am not hopeful, I'm being very frank, that this will be used again to attack those of us who would like to have some form of effective gun regulation as playing politics. And I hope that as the family members who are still probably at this moment trying to find their loved ones amongst the 500-plus wounded or injured, and God forbid those who have died, that America will rise up with those families and the families who have faced this tragedy across America and those in Chicago.
But here's a question, Congresswoman. Congress did nothing after Sandy Hook. That's where we had 20 children who were gunned down.
Roland, you're right, and I mentioned that. You're absolutely right. It is appalling. And the, how should I say it, the Lucifer in the room is the leadership of an organization, not even the membership, because about 80+% of the membership of the NRA has no fear or apprehension about real gun safety legislation, which is what the banning of assault weapons, the AR-15s, the weapons of war, or at least a more stringent requirement for purchasing them. Obviously, people are jumping to the conclusion that Mr. Paddock bought these guns legally. It is insane that he was able to buy it. It's even more insane that this week they were trying to move the Sportsman's Heritage and Recreational Enhancement Act. What an absurdity, which was to, in fact, weaken the ability to possess or to purchase silencers.
Right.
So that means that any average person on the street would be able to purchase silencers. And I'd ask your viewers how much more carnage would have occurred if Paddock had those silencers, and maybe he wouldn't have gotten the joy of it, because that is the way that the SWAT team was able to get to the 32nd floor, is they followed the signs of the shots, and that was the way ultimately that the victims and those who were being shot upon were able to detect finally where it was. And this bill also wants to have armor-piercing, to allow the purchase of armor-piercing ammunition, the importation of foreign-made military-type bombs. Can you imagine that this is a bill that the Republicans thought was sensical and put through on the floor? So my question is, you make a very valid point, and frustration comes because we are continually redundant.
Right.
But I do believe that the president now would have a role. The question becomes, what will Mr. Trump do?
Okay.
He is someone who's keen on putting people in their place. What will he do?
All right. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, we appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
Joining us our panel, Tiffany Lofton, civil and labor union organizer, George Farrell, founder of Black PAC, Republican PAC, and author of Success is Colorblind, Avis Jones-DeWeaver, leadership strategist, and author of How Exceptional Black Women Lead. Folks, last night, even the late night talk show host weighed in on what took place. This is what Jimmy Kimmel had to say. He was a native of Las Vegas.
Well, hello, everyone. Here we are again in the aftermath of another terrible, inexplicable, shocking, and painful tragedy, this time in Las Vegas, which happens to be my hometown and Cleto's hometown, Cleto Sr.'s hometown. And as you know, at least 59 people are dead. Hundreds of people were wounded in what they say was the deadliest mass shooting in modern American history, coming about a year and a half after the previous deadliest mass shooting in modern American history in Orlando, where 49 people lost their lives. And of course, we pray for the victims and for their families and friends, and we wonder why, even though there's probably no way to ever know why a human being would do something like this to other human beings who are at a concert, having fun and listening to music. Jason Aldean was on stage. Luke Combs, who was here with us tonight, he played the show too, and obviously no one could have ever expected that something terrible would happen, but it did. A very sick person smuggled 17 guns into his hotel room and smashed out the windows, started firing indiscriminately from the 32nd floor into a crowd of 22,000 people across the street. And as a result of that, this morning we have children without parents and fathers without sons, mothers without daughters. We lost 2 police officers. We lost a nurse from Tennessee, a special ed teacher from a local school here in Manhattan Beach. And it's a kind of thing that it makes you want to throw up or give up. It's too much to even process. All these devastated families who now have to live with this pain forever because one person with a violent and insane voice in his head managed to stockpile a collection of high-powered rifles and use them to shoot people.
George Farrell, I want to go to you first. You saw numerous Republicans yesterday tweet, let's pray for the folks in Las Vegas, yet they support anything the NRA does. The Republican Party is the party standing in the way of sensible gun control, whether it's advanced background checks, whether it's, again, not allowing any American to own a silencer. When will your party stand up to the National Rifle Association?
Roland, I think you're going to see a lot of change come through. I've noticed something today. The president has not tweeted. I am so proud that he has not tweeted. I'm saying gently. It seems like this might be the moment that changes America, that changes the Republican Party. I've checked again to make sure the president hasn't tweeted. I'm so happy about that. I hope he gets off this tweetosphere. But to talk about,
you realize that's a very low bar.
I know that's a low bar, but it's done. It's done. I think he's maturing in office. I think this is going to change a lot of minds. I think we're going to have a discourse on gun control now. We're going to talk about what's reasonable. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe that you should have the right to a handgun or to protect yourself. It's better to have a gun than not have one, to have a gun and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Avis, if 20 kids were gunned down, slaughtered in Sandy Hook, and this Congress did nothing, how all of a sudden will they do something now?
Yeah, it's hard to believe, especially since earlier in the year, this person in the White House rescinded regulations by President Obama, which ultimately made it easier for mentally ill people to actually buy guns. The logic behind that, I really don't understand at all. But the big difference between now and Sandy Hook is that Sandy Hook happened under President Obama's watch. And we all know the history of this party that said that they would oppose anything this president wanted to do. So they basically valued that political principle more than they valued even the lives of children.
Tiffany.
Good morning, Roland. Here's the problem. We have a party who is continuously in denial. Since 2015, we have had 10 mass shootings, 27 babies at an elementary school in Connecticut, and now what just happened in Vegas. We saw what happened in North Carolina at the church. We saw what happened at the Pulse nightclub last year. Over 10 mass shootings, and every time we wake up in the morning, the Republicans say, well, we need to now talk about gun reform, and this is the time we're going to do it, and this is the time we're going to solve this problem. But we have seen a do-nothing Congress, and what we need to know going now into the 2018 election is that every single one of these Bamas needs to get replaced. It is important that we take this seriously and not say at the end of a mass shooting, after lives have been taken, that now is the time for us to do something. It has been time for us to do something, and we have done nothing. And so we need to replace this Congress, talk about not only gun reform, which is very serious, but it is legal to carry guns in Vegas. He was allowed to have these guns in Vegas.
Right.
Now, so when we talk about gun reform and we talk about solving this problem, it is more than just gun reform or whatever terms people feel comfortable using. And I really appreciate, Roland, which is why I come on your show, you saying a domestic terrorist, right? Because we continue to have this language where folks don't want to call white people terrorists, and he definitely was a terrorist.
Well, and not only that, also a lot of American media keeps saying this is the deadliest shooting in American history. That is not true. You can say modern American history, but you have a number of times when 60 to 100, 200, 300 African Americans were killed by racists in this country. And so let's be factual when we talk about that. I'm going to go to break right now. We're going to go to break with Stephen Colbert. This is what he had to say last night. Again, challenging this president and this Congress to do something. And we come back, we'll talk about the Supreme Court. But here's Stephen Colbert last night with his commentary on the deadly shooting in Las Vegas.
Today, we feel they've risen to a new level, but we cannot accept that as a new normal. This afternoon, the president called this an act of pure evil, and I think he's right. So what then are we willing to do to combat pure evil? The answer can't be nothing. It can't. This time it was a concert in Las Vegas. Last time it was Republican congressmen and their staff under fire on a ball field. Last week, Representative Steve Scalise returned to the floor and was greeted with a bipartisan hero's welcome. It was the kind of moment that gives you hope that Congress might work together for the common good.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no. That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.